Greetings, listeners, and welcome to this episode of Out of the Darkness. I'm your host, Angela, and as always, I thank you for joining me. In this episode, we're going to have a look at some true and creepy tales from the Australian Outback. But before we begin, I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our supporters and listeners. Without you, our work would not be possible. And now, on to today's episode. Sit back, relax, and prepare for some truly creepy tales. The Australian Outback is notorious for spooky events, and I recently had one of my own. I'm going to share it with you now. I was on a recent road trip to Ceduna, and travelling at night through the outback does carry a fair few risks in our beautiful country, and not all of them can be seen or understood. Ours occurred at a small town in the west of our state at about 4:30 a.m. We were refuelling at a self-serve petrol station. Now let me just set the scene for those who've never been through these parts. These towns don't have that many people and therefore don't require a 24-hour service station. In the middle of the night, there's not a soul around, and it's pretty much pitch black dark apart from the lonely lights of that service station, which I will mention looks like something out of Wolf Creek to begin with. The best you might get is a lonely trucker stopping past. Maybe. So here we are, myself, my husband, and my eldest daughter, refueling in order to make it back to Port Augusta. My husband goes to the main building to use the self-service payment, and I go to the far side of the dirt car park to safely have a cigarette, and my daughter is at the car. While we were all spread out, we can still hear each other. In the distance, I hear a dog barking, like crazy barking, as if they're warning their owner of something, but I'm not too worried as it's clearly some distance away. Suddenly, my husband and daughter are hurrying for the car and asking each other what in God's name is that. My daughter is like, "Come on, Mum, hurry." I don't see or hear anything but that dog barking, but in this situation it's best to get moving first and ask questions later. When I asked what was going on, they looked at me as if I'd gone mad, and asked quite calmly, "Didn't you hear the loud screaming coming from that bushland across the road?" "No," I say. They described both hearing loud screaming coming from the darkness. All I heard was the dog. What makes this weird is if they could both hear the screaming, there's no way I shouldn't have heard it. Weirder still was they didn't hear the dog barking. So we get back on the road and out of town as soon as possible. As we're heading out, we're discussing the possible reasons for the screaming that I didn't hear. I said, well, when we stopped here earlier for fuel, there was clearly someone in that building, as they were playing music. It was playing so loud, it made me feel kind of safe to know we weren't alone out there. My husband laughed and said there was no music. Honest to God, there was music coming from that building, but he is adamant there was not. Our friends are local to that area, so I explained it to them, and they were not surprised at what we had heard or didn't hear, as the case may be. Our friend's daughter has, however, decided when she is making that run alone, she will not be stopping at that service station for fuel alone any longer. The paranormal works like that. It might give one group member an experience that the others don't have, almost like they want to divide and conquer you. I have an Aussie story for you. My friend's dad was a trucker out of Perth, and this is the only story I've heard that's really given me the creeps. So he's driving back to Perth in convoy with a mate of his back to back through the night, through the Nullarbor. If you know anything about Aboriginal legend, the Nullarbor is where the ancestors' spirits walk, and also prime Yowie country. They radio each other because they realise they'll need to rest up, and decide to sleep through to dawn and make Perth in the morning. So they pull over in the middle of the vast nothingness, lock up and hunker down for the night in their trucks. At some point in the blackness, my friend's dad wakes up with this intense feeling of being not just watched, but stared down. He's not a superstitious guy either. He's a proper no-nonsense countryman. But he says He just had this gut feeling that something was out there and it wanted him gone. He says he scrambled up to the cab, chucked his keys in and turned the lights on, and that at that exact second in the middle of the night his mate does the same. Both trucks roared to life and they take off down the highway without a word spoken between them. Later his mate says he felt the same predatory state and fear for his life. Now, when I read this story, it reminded me of a story that my friend has told me that happened to her and her husband while they were on the air highway heading to Port Augusta. They'd been coming back from a long road trip and were tired, so decided to stop at a rest stop. When they had pulled in, there were some other trucks parked there, but at the time that this particular experience occurred, everybody else had gone. So they pulled into the rest stop and had fallen asleep. My friend says that she was in the passenger seat and her husband in the driver's seat. She was using the side pillar where the seatbelt comes from to rest her pillow. She explains that she was suddenly awoken and that while she couldn't see anything, she was filled with a sense of dread. This dread was so much so that she feared for her life. She said she woke her husband up and quickly explained to him that something was wrong and they should leave. She said that the feeling specifically was that she was afraid to look out of the window where she was resting her head, that if she did, it may be the last thing that she ever did. She's never exactly found out what it could have been, but there are a lot of Aboriginal legends around those areas of little men that are sinister in nature. Either way, I'm going to show her this story, and maybe she'll come on the podcast and tell you about it herself. She spends a lot of time travelling through the Outback and has a lot of really interesting as well as spooky tales from her time out there.
I've never told this story to anyone before, simply due to having no answer and thinking that there's not much to be gained from telling it. Many, many years ago at Wongi Campgrounds, Queensland, Australia, my father, my friend and I were out camping for a couple of days. Usually it was packed, but we went during the week and got 2 days off school. I can't really remember the reason why. I think it was just because my dad had a few days off, but that's beside the point. Due to it being midweek, the grounds were empty. Now, we've been here many, many times before, but never alone. So we were excited to have the whole grounds to ourselves. Now, we're no strangers to the Australian bush. We know what to look out for, and we know how to play it safe. So at night, knowing no one was around to mess with our camp, we decided to go for a mini bushwalk to the other side of the river that ran through the grounds. Now, when I say grounds, it's really just a clearing in the middle of the bush, not a properly established grounds, and far away from all roads. We got to the opposite riverside, and looking out to the river, we could see a bright light just near our campgrounds. Thinking it could have been the fire, we did put it out, but they easily relight. We walked back through the bush to our site, still able to see the large light. However, when we got to our side, we realised it was indeed not the fire. As we were able to be closer to the river this time, we saw that the light was over the river, not in it, but over. We were somewhat scared, but thought there was some explanation for it, maybe a torch or something along those lines. But looking from where we were, there was nothing under it, and the light was a good 70 centimetres above the water. And it was still, dead still. The light itself flickering, sort of like a fire, but it was in no way attached to anything. Just a large, between the size of a tennis and soccer ball size, bowl floating, giving off strong fire-like light, but more light bulb centre. This went on for maybe 30 minutes, as we tried splashing the water and trying to figure out what it was. But it didn't move. It didn't do anything. It just floated in that one spot, in complete silence, unlike the sounds a fire would make. Dad decided to get the torch and his camera, and of course, being scared 12-year-olds, we went with him. As soon as we got to the campsite, which was only maybe 100 metres away, the light was gone. We ran back with the torch. Nothing there. There was no one there, no campers, just gone. We didn't really talk about it because we didn't know what it was, how or why. Min Min lights are something that's very popular in the Australian Outback, and that's the only explanation I've got. But they have no explanation, so it's a dead end. An orb sighting in regional Australia. This occurred on the 30th of April 2020. I live in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. I was road tripping with a friend up the coast to Lismore, about 744 kilometres away, to buy his dream car. We left Sydney at around 7 a.m. and drove for around 8 hours, stopping every so often to stretch our legs and appreciate the countryside. There was a lot of fresh green leaves sprouting from recently burned trees, which was nice to see. After his buying of the car, we drove for another 40 minutes into the night. We decided to sleep at New Italy rest stop, just off the Pacific Highway, the middle of nowhere. In the sky, the few clouds catching lightning, amongst the most stars I've ever seen in my life. We sat and appreciated that for a long time. We were in the car park, which sat on a dirt road next to the New Italy Museum, which documents Italian migration to the area in the late 19th century. This same road, Swan Bay New Italy Road, leads down a path bordered by trees, eventually bending right before a hill. With our phone torches out, we decided to explore down this road. Our lights catching on the high-vis road markers, we decided to test how dark it was, so we turned off our torches, and the road reflectors disappeared, except for the one in the middle of the road. I turned my torch back on, can see reflectors leading up the right side of the road. I stare at the light in the middle of the road. I turn the torch off, reflector's gone, and the light is still there. I try this again, confused, noting this is indeed not a road reflector. The light is very small but easily visible, as it's changing from red to white to green randomly and moderately, and seems to be in the middle of the road, perhaps hovering very slightly, if at all, around 10 metres away. It's pitch black aside from the stars and this one light. We tried to rationalise it. Is it someone on their phone? No. Is it a TV on a property? No, it's on the road. Animal eyes still need lights to glow. What is it? It wasn't emitting any light. It was just kind of changing colour. We were staring at it when my friend and I felt a menacing energy, like an impending doom, a pang in the chest. It felt like this thing was inspecting me. The more we stared at it, the darker everything else got, and personally it felt as if everything was closing in on me, becoming dilated. The trees, the stars, the thunder rumbling, and this orb was pumping rings blacker than what was already black towards us or outward. It was hard to tell. It was hard to look away. I felt many emotions, mainly of awe and fear, bringing tears to my eyes. This was a 30 to 40 second interaction, after which we both witnessed it disappear at the same time, then promptly walked back to our cars, bewildered and scared, confirming we both saw the same thing. I was pretty freaked out by it, and almost cried myself to sleep in my car. Any time I've thought about it since, I tend to well up, especially while writing this. Has anyone had a similar experience, particularly with orbs? Thank you for reading. So this happened around 5 to 6 years ago. I live in Perth, Western Australia. Me and my best friend lived in the same suburb at the time. We were underage, so when it came to weekends, we usually just went exploring around the parks and the quarry in our neighbourhood. It was late at night and we were still just wandering the streets near our house, doing whatever we were doing. We dared ourselves to go into the quarry at night, which is pitch black and surrounded by bushland. It's a decent-sized area, bigger than a football field. We chickened out at the entrance and I decided to sit on a rock just outside the quarry while we were chatting. So just to give you an idea of my position, my back was facing the bushes and the quarry, and I was facing towards my friend, talking to her. Her face suddenly went blank mid-conversation, and she just froze up for a few seconds before sprinting off and yelling at me to run after her. I had no idea what was going on, but I ended up booking it too. Honestly, I thought it was some sort of human threat, like a dodgy person. We ran like 2 streets down before she managed to stop, and I couldn't get her to talk for a few minutes. She was absolutely terrified. She told me that when she was talking to me, a face suddenly appeared just to the left of my shoulder, probably around 1 metre back and coming from the bushes. She couldn't really see if there was a body, but she just described the face. She said it was evil and had this menacing presence she couldn't describe. I can't get her to accurately describe what she saw, but she says it was like the features weren't defined. She says the eyes were blackened out, and she thinks it had like a grin on its face. Just down the road from where a few years ago I'd previously lived in southeast Australia is the opening into about 100 acres of woodlands and bush that I frequently went into when I was younger to do the usual things, riding and camping, etc. I was out driving at around 11:30 one night with my girlfriend, and as we were in the area I decided to show her the woodlands. She loved everything to do with nature, and it was summer, so an extremely warm night. I left my car with the lights on shining into the trees, as we weren't going too far in, and it was pitch black, and the two of us just kind of sort of sat chatting, having a smoke and generally relaxing. She was sitting on some sort of map of the area that had been put onto plastic, and I was keeping an eye on the trees, as I had a feeling something was just wrong. I've read on here that a few people have said they felt they were in danger, although nothing around them was off. It was this same feeling. Every sense was almost reaching out, and my adrenaline was up there. There wasn't anything I could see that seemed any different. After lighting another cigarette to calm my nerves, I scanned the tree line again and realised it looked different. After staring into the dark, I saw that there was moonlight now lighting up grass where it couldn't have before, as there had been a black shape blocking it, which I thought was a tree. I get goosebumps just typing this, but the only way to describe it was all sounds ceased. Everything went dead silent, and a few seconds later, this disgusting feeling of dread fell over me, and I saw motion in the dark as this thing crawled towards us on all fours. I've seen nearly every animal in the outback here, and we don't have large predators like in the US or Europe, but somehow I knew this was a predator, and it wasn't hiding itself from us, just kind of crawling slowly towards us. I don't know if my girlfriend saw it, as I couldn't look away. Just as it reached the line where my car lights were able to illuminate it, it reared back on two legs and just sat staring at us. Now, I'm 6'4", and this thing was about another metre larger than me, with arms that were far too long that reached down into the ground, and all I could make out was an off-white, almost yellowish fur on it, and in the dim light I could make out the silhouette of its head, like a dog or wolf. I wasn't able to move as it stared at me, but it was at this point my girlfriend gasped, which seemed to break what was stopping me from thinking logically. I grabbed her by the arm and sprinted to the car, slamming the doors, and tore out of there as fast as I could. Both of us too scared to speak until about a half an hour later. We've both discussed it many times, and the feeling that we had was what I imagined a rabbit sees when it catches a wolf or fox looking at it. This is something that would be able to end us with absolute ease if it so chose. Neither of us have been able to come up with an explanation for what it was, but it has definitely changed the way I view the woods and bush, and when I go camping or hiking now, I think back to that and wonder what it was, and if I will ever see anything like it again. I live in Australia, in Queensland, and I usually go to bed around 11 p.m. Then, just as I closed my eyes, this loud screech immediately woke me up. It sounded like if someone had a dry throat with a wobbly voice. If any of you know this creature, please comment below. People say it may be a fox, but my house is near the front yard and not the back. Although we do get foxes trying to get our chickens, there's no way a fox would come up to the front, especially with cars zooming by. I can hear two fighting in the trees, so there must be a territorial animal. This is in Greenbank. I heard the sound again, and it sounds like squeaky shrieks in bursts, like it would go on like 7 times, and then repeat a few seconds later. And no, it's not an owl, it's not hooting, it's just shrieking in the darkness. I live outside of Melbourne, Australia, and this is the crazy experience I just had. It is 10 past 10. I was outside on my deck having a smoke, and I looked up at the sky, and suddenly two stars appeared directly on top of each other, evenly spaced apart. Then a third star appeared directly under the second, and again evenly spaced. Another star appeared blinking and moving towards the first star, then went down towards the second, then down towards the third, and away. It was moving very slowly, and each star was blinking in a pattern. I called my partner outside to verify what I saw, and he confirmed I wasn't crazy, and witnessed the moving star slowly move in patterns that a normal craft or satellite couldn't move in. It was going up and down and away, then back at a consistent slow speed that had control. It was quite remarkable. I checked again at 13 past 10 and all three stars were gone. Update. I just chatted to my housemate that sadly was in his room and did not witness it. He said that my friend and her partner that live about 15 minutes away witnessed the same thing, but months ago. I called my friend and she confirmed she saw the exact same thing, and then her partner confirmed it as well. They even confirmed the direction they saw it in from local landmarks and buildings, which completely matched the direction that we saw it. So 4 people have witnessed something similar in a space of a few months in our small town. I'm looking to see if anyone has had a similar experience or may have an explanation. A bit of background information. This is my auntie's encounter from last night, the 18th of June 2020, in New South Wales, Australia. It occurred at approximately 9:30 p.m. Earlier that day she had driven past a motorcycle accident which had sadly resulted in a fatality. My auntie, we'll call her Terry, has always been slightly psychic and has had several encounters with spirits of passed away family members throughout her life, but has never seen anything like this or experienced the sense of dread that came with it. Last night after work, Terry was driving home along a stretch of road that is surrounded by bushland on either side. Upon driving up over a slight hill, she saw a figure standing on the tree line, illuminated by her headlights. The figure immediately had her full attention, and a total sense of dread came over her entire body. She described it as a constricting bubble. This figure stood approximately 8 feet tall and had elongated limbs, was completely white. It had no clothes, no genitals, and no face. The figure was directly facing her and turned to track her car as she drove past. Terry immediately began sobbing and called my mother, stating that she had just seen a terrible, horrible thing on the side of the road. She drove down the same road today to try and find an explanation, but found nothing. It was almost like a Slender Man type figure. We have spoken to a few people and here are a few explanations. One friend suggested it may have been the victim of the crash from earlier in the day, trying to leave Earth but had become stuck. Another friend believes that it was a guardian angel sending her a sign of some kind. It is believed angels may present themselves in a seriously striking form as a distraction to save or warn you from something. Maybe she was speeding and it stopped her from having an accident. I'd like to add that my auntie nor myself are not religious at all, but all our family has been baptised and finds comfort in the idea that there are people looking out for us. We would love to hear your thoughts and ideas on what she may have experienced.
I pulled over for a break on the way to Melbourne from Sydney at a truck stop. No street lights or anything, just pitch black. No other trucks or cars at the stop. I turned off my lights and switched off the truck. I locked the truck from both sides and jumped into bed, setting my alarm and putting my phone up above me in the compartment. I tossed and turned for about 10 minutes. I couldn't get to sleep due to it being prime summer temperatures, reaching about 30 degrees at night. I'm looking up at the ceiling, mentally planning the day ahead, when suddenly the passenger side door opens up slightly and the cabin light turns on. Now the truck is a fairly late model truck and in pristine condition, so there's no question about the door being faulty or anything. I just sat there for what felt like an eternity, expecting someone to come up and see me sitting there. No one came up, nor was there any noise at all, just quiet, eerie silence. I grabbed my torch and jumped down, walked around the truck. No other trucks were around, nor were there any cars. It was just me and my fully loaded big double. After about 10 minutes of getting messed around, I locked up and went to bed again. When I woke up the next morning, I fixed myself up along with the bed, opened the curtains, and there, out the window, is a cemetery next to the stop where I'd parked. Hunger and laziness all escaped upon that realization. I grabbed my keys, got my shoes, and switched the truck on and just got the hell out of there as soon as possible. I have quite a few stories I could tell, but I decided to start with this one because I think it illustrates a few good things about me and my now husband. It was also the first time I really saw a ghost right in front of me, rather than in my peripheral. I think I may be a bit of an empath judging by my experience and the ones I've had over the last 50 odd years. My husband Jay, however, is a skeptic. He says he would love to see a ghost but doesn't expect to. He once took part in a study at universities. You know, one of those classic, can you guess what card I'm holding up experiments? It was in the 70s. Jay got so many wrong, it was statistically significant in the negative direction. He says it proves there's no such thing. I think it indicates the opposite. I believe he actively blocks his own abilities to the point where he negates the paranormal around him. Being around him is like wearing psychic earplugs. It's very soothing. The following occurred in the early 80s when we were at university in northern New South Wales. Most of the students lived on campus and the uni had its own radio station to cater to them. A friend of ours, G, was a DJ at the time and had a midnight till dawn weekend shift. She invited us up to the station one night to take some albums from the station record collection. The record station was located in a faculty building about a 20-minute walk from the college where we all lived. G had the keys and locked all the doors behind us. The station consisted of 2 rooms, a large rectangular room housing an office area, and 2 glass-walled studio booths partitioned off. The entrance door was in the long wall opposite Studio A. The door to the library was in the short wall next to Studio B. Other than the library, the entire area is visible from either of the 2 studios.
G commenced her shift using Studio B, while J set up in Studio A with some blank cassette tapes, and I headed into the library to pick some albums. The record library was fantastic. 4 walls of floor-to-ceiling shelving packed solid with classic rock LPs. I was standing on a chair choosing some music from the top shelf when I started feeling that there was someone or something behind me, almost but not quite touching me. I was telling myself not to turn around. There's nothing there, but the feeling got so strong that I really wanted to get my back against a wall. I have personal space issues, and the sensation of anything being that close was just too much for me, and I had to get out of there. I grabbed a couple of records, took them to J, then went to talk to G in Studio B. From where I was sitting, facing G, who had her back to the main room, I could see the entire radio station. J was in the studio to my right, the main door was diagonally to my right, the one and only door to the record library was diagonally to my left, all clearly visible through the glass. I watched J get up to leave Studio A, walk across the office space from right to left behind G, and enter the record library. As he disappeared into the library, a figure in blue came out of the library door, crossed rapidly from left to right behind G, and entered Studio A. I turned my head to look directly into Studio A, but there was no one there. About 15 minutes later, J came out of the record library and walked back to Studio A. Immediately, the blue figure shot out of Studio A, crossed behind G, and went back into the library. G must have seen my eyes following, because she said, quite excitedly, "You saw it, didn't you? I knew if there was really something here, you'd know." It turns out G had been feeling she wasn't alone up there at night, and having heard some of my experiences, she decided to try an experiment. She kept her experience to herself, then waited to see if I picked up anything. Thanks, G. It also turns out that while J ain't afraid of no ghost, the ghosts are afraid of him. My sister saw a tall creature with backward knees. We live in the Northern Territory, Australia. Yesterday, my sister told me she saw something in the yard. She lives on a huge rural block, and it was about 6:15. The sun was still up and she was cooking for her family. They were all outside playing, and she doesn't know what made her look up, but in the bushes she saw a long-legged creature. Its knees were bent backwards. It was brown in colour and with almost like a hunchback. She described the skin as leather-looking. It ran to another bush, and she said it was fast. She almost got the vibe that it was cheeky and was trying to play hide-and-seek with her. She didn't alert her family, but she suddenly found herself inside the house for no reason. She remembers walking inside, but was kind of like, why am I in here? As she turned and went back outside, the creature was gone. She didn't see its face or head, but said it was definitely taller than a grown man. Has anyone else experienced anything like this or heard of anything similar? And that's our episode for today. As always, the team here at D A Paranormal Service thanks you for joining us. If you would like to support our podcast, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com, the virtual tip jar, or visit our store on Facebook. If you have a paranormal story you would like to share with us, or a topic you would like to suggest, please contact us at daparanormalservice@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. All of our contact links will be in the notes section of this podcast. Remember to subscribe and follow if you haven't already, and share us with your friends. We really appreciate all the support, and without you guys, our work would not be possible. This podcast is made possible with Anchor FM, the platform that gives you everything you need to create a podcast straight from your phone. Once again, we thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.